The freeze on the Lok Sabha seat delimitation is expected to end soon. So based on today's population, North Indian states are expected to gain more seats, whereas South Indian states will lose seats. So is this fair to states that have controlled their population better? Let's find out.
Hello, sir.
Hi, Shrita.
The question of delimitation has been in the news, and the narrative is that southern states and federalism are being threatened. What is your take on this?
The Constitution, Shrita, as you know, specifically prescribed that every 10 years there will be a decennial census. And on the basis of the population, as far as practicable, the number of seats allocated to a state will be proportionate to the population of the state. Small states, because obviously if a very tiny state, you can't have a fragment of a parliament seat, therefore you go to at least one seat or something.
Yeah.
We've had that practice until 1971 census. Sometime around 1975-76, during emergency, the Constitution was amended, and this part of amendment was not nullified. So the 42nd Amendment was very controversial, converted India into a unitary state, more or less, and extinguished liberties, which was undone later. But this part of the Constitution, which froze the number of seats allocated to each state on the basis of 1971 census for 25 years, that was not touched later on also. And therefore, whatever was the number allocated in 71 according to the census continued until 2000, until 1990. Well, I think it was 2001, because 1976 the Constitution was amended. Then some of us, busybodies you may call, notably Mr. K.C. Sivaramakrishnan, the former Secretary Urban Development of Government of India, and I, we took it on ourselves to persuade the Parliament and the political parties to continue that freeze in number for another 25 years. Because at that time, if you recall, after Pokhran explosion, America and Europe imposed sanctions against India. So India was going through difficult times economically. And politically, there was a lot of instability because Vajpayee government had some 25-30 parties in coalition. In 1998, if you recall, the government was brought down, the election was held again in 1999. So anything to upset the federal balance could easily lead to political instability. So we persuaded the powers that be that it's better to kick the ball down the road for another 25 years, and that's how the freeze continued. In 2026, it's very open now. If you do nothing about it, the original provision of the Constitution come into operation. That means, based on the census of 2026, you will have now number of constituencies allocated to each state in proportion to the population. In these 50 years, some states, the population has grown considerably. Everywhere it has grown, but some states it has grown considerably because birth rates, while it's all coming down everywhere in the country, some states are a little slower. Some states, they've achieved stable population stabilization level much earlier, 2.1 fertility rate, etc. Obviously, those states which were ahead in terms of population control, they are going to lose the population share as a proportion of India. Therefore, under the original constitutional provisions, they will lose some seats. The states that gain population will gain some seats. This is a normal federal practice and problem all over the world. Now, let us deconstruct. Population basis of number of seats, perfectly normal, world over. But federal countries having different arrangements depending on the situation, again, perfectly normal. Take Europe. European Union, while it's not a single country, for some purposes functions more or less as a single country. So European Parliament is there. Generally, it's expected that the number of seats are in proportion to the population. But by an agreement, by negotiations, the bigger states get a few seats less than the population deserves. The smaller states get a few seats more than the population is entitled to. For instance, I have the numbers here. Take Germany, France, Italy, Spain, Poland, the 5 biggest countries. Each of them is getting fewer seats than we should have gotten, if only it's in proportion to the population. Germany, instead of 134 members in the current strength of the European Parliament, they get 96 out of the 720 members. Similarly, France, instead of 109, they get 81, so on and so forth. Whereas take Denmark, Finland, Slovakia, and Sweden. They all get, Sweden again gains seats. Used to have 17 seats is entitled to get, it gets 21. Other three countries, instead of 9 seats, they're entitled according to population, they get 15 each. So it's a federal arrangement. We can have any number of arguments. These are not issues decided by legal principles alone. People who want population to be the basis can argue that's the original provision of the Constitution. One person, one vote, each vote has the same weightage, and therefore in proportion to population. You cannot seriously question that. People who want status quo to prevail will say, look, federal arrangement has to be by compromise, by some kind of a compact. Europe has example, other countries have examples. Therefore, let's come to an arrangement. United States upper house, there are 50 states, the tiniest state and the biggest state, the difference is 40 to 50 times. And yet, all states have the same number of senators in the upper house. So, it really is up to us. I think somewhere a compromise is required. The states that want a freeze probably must agree to some amount of flexibility. The states that want seats in proportion to the population must agree that other considerations are equally important. Therefore, I think midway, we must try and see that we build a consensus.
Sir, do you think then that using the 2011 population census as the basis for delimitation, is that fair?
No, you see, fair depends on where you come from. So, fair is not a correct expression because there is no absolute standard of fairness. Is it a reasonable compromise? I believe there's a basis for a reasonable compromise. I'm not even saying it's a reasonable compromise, but some such basis. We must acknowledge the principle that the population increase must give them extra seats. We must also acknowledge the principle that containing population growth should not penalize them excessively. So that means a bit for population, but a bit of sacrifice, like for instance, Germany, France, Italy, Spain, they're all accepting. That is the part of being nationhood on a very complex, diverse federal polity. Remember, India is the most diverse federal polity in the world. I mean, there's no country with 22 officially recognized languages in the Constitution. Many of them with thousands of years of literature, history, culture, civilization. So we are a unique nation. Sometimes that uniqueness, to preserve it and to preserve unity, it demands some amount of accommodation on both sides. So this could well be a basis. But any such thing, instead of government sort of foisting it suddenly as a formula, it's better to examine the issues in detail, go into the numbers, see what is likely to happen at the scenario 1, scenario 2, scenario 3, and then make everybody agree to a compromise. Otherwise, what will happen, even if you have an acceptable compromise proposed, if that is the starting point, some people may make it the beginning of the negotiation. So any formula or any solution that people have in mind, it's better to allow it to emerge as a part of the negotiating process rather than foist upon the parliament and the country.
Sir, so at the same time, in this, in the context of this divide, we see a debate around fiscal devolution, financial devolution. That is, that some states say that they are contributing more while they are receiving less. So, how do you see this in the context of federalism?
First of all, the purpose of federal devolution is to ensure certain benchmarks. If Bihar has 1/5 of the per capita income of some of the richer states, if that continues in perpetuity, in a nation there's only one citizenship. Remember, India has only a single citizenship. Unlike a country like the United States, where every state has state citizenship also, India has only one citizenship. You are a citizen of India. You are not a citizen of Bihar or Telangana or Tamil Nadu or Karnataka. And when that is the case, unless we are also willing to accept that in order to maintain unity of the country, the benefits of common market, the benefit that accrues because of the large size in terms of global influence, diplomacy, and national defense, if you're not willing to pay a little bit of price, then you're being very silly. You cannot always argue in favor of what is best in an isolated circumstance. You have to take the totality of circumstances. In that sense, I think our constitutional makers, successive governments, political parties, and the Finance Commission have done a superb job. we all criticize our political process for good reason. There are many things wrong with the political process. But there's no country on earth that could reconcile so much of diversity so harmoniously, preserving unity. In 1950, when we founded our republic, very few people in the world, very few observers gave us a chance. They thought that India would never remain united for 50, 60, 70 years. India would break up, and India would not retain freedom. India would not see orderly transfer of power. India would not see economic growth. On all these counts, we found the skeptics, we proved them wrong. That happened because of accommodation, because of a sense of nationhood. So without going overboard, without doing something manifestly unacceptable, I think the poorer states must get a slightly better deal, but the richer states must not feel they're losing too much. And that's the reason why, if you take the financial devolution by the Finance Commission, for decades we've had one issue: population containment. Population control measures actually had a 10% weightage in terms of allocation. Now, the 16th Finance Commission, whose report has come out recently, they have actually added another 10% for economic contribution to the GDP from the state. So we are trying to meet halfway both the concerns. After all, when there is poverty and need, we must provide something. And when there is genuine economic growth and contribution to the country, we must not ignore their rights. And I think that's the right way to go about it. Remember, we also removed the revenue deficit grant. Again, that was typically going to the poor states whose administrative and welfare needs are substantial, but their revenue potential is minimal. But now we removed that also. So that's our third element, which trying to equalize. That means the richer states don't have a disadvantage. Again, we have to come midway. No state can have fully everything free. A poorer state or a smaller state cannot claim that I want a special package and I also want revenue deficit grant because I can spend as I please. So you must have a balance. It must be rational, it must be acceptable. I think India is good at it. We've done a remarkable job, in my opinion, about fiscal cut-ups.
So then, what then is the solution for this unequal distribution of resources and population?
The resources, I think the Finance Commission is a venerable body. There is a political consensus. They did a masterly job. They have been doing successively a masterly job. But remember, if you take the bigger picture of the union finances being transferred to states, what many people do not realize is while 41% of the divisible pool of the taxes is transferred, in actual practice, 55 to 56% of the gross revenues of the union government, non-debt revenues of the union government, are transferred to the states, either constitutional devolution or grants in aid from the Finance Commission, or the centrally sponsored schemes, or statutory programs like employment guarantee, etc. Together, 55 to 56% of the total money raised by union government in a non-debt manner, not the borrowings, is all transferred to states. And states spend in India typically about 60% of the total expenditure of the governments in the country. Union government spends only about 37%. And only 3%, that's where the real problem is. And everybody is ignoring that. Only about 3% of the total government expenditure is incurred in and by the local governments. Compare this with China, which is an authoritarian country, self-confessedly so, a single-party dictatorship. And yet, in China, 51% of the total government expenditure is incurred by and in the local governments. So the real challenge is not at the state level. That is a bit of political posturing. It is really at the local level. Our cities, our towns, our villages, they are starved of resources, starved of authority. We are over-centralized. We are under-delivering. So unless we really refocus the debate on fiscal federalism to local government needs and allocation of resources with accountability there, much of this is political grandstanding.
Yes. So then what is the solution for this population inequality, sir?
As I said, it will be somewhat premature on our part to talk of a solution.
Yeah.
We can look at possible approaches to the solution.
Yeah.
As I mentioned, take Europe, you have what they call, I think, digressive proportional representation, if I'm not mistaken. Basically, it is broadly reflecting the population, but not exactly proportionate. So bigger states give up a little, smaller states gain a little to give them the sense of security. So we can adopt that. And more or less, that's what actually happened because of the freeze of the parliamentary constituencies number state-wise since 1971. But a long-term thing is migration. Remember, we have only one citizenship. Take the country like the United States, 50 states, very diverse, not as diverse as India, but economically very diverse. Mississippi is probably one of the poorest states, per capita income is probably 40-50% less than the national income, national per capita income. Maybe half of the richer states per capita income. For them, it's a big distinction. In India, 4 to 5-fold is also not uncommon. So what happens in that country? People migrate in droves. They're much more footloose than a country like India. We are much more rooted. Though we are beginning to see significant migration now from rural to urban and from one region to another region in search of jobs and opportunities and livelihoods, which is a good thing. That's what nationhood is about. And our constitution recognizes it because we have fundamental rights, no matter where you're born, whatever caste, region, religion, language, gender. You have a right to travel anywhere. You have freedom to pursue any profession, practice any trade, establish business anywhere, and live comfortably and peacefully and with all rights intact anywhere. That's what nationhood is. That is non-negotiable. So what typically happens is, as some regions have greater economic dynamism, either because historically they're a little ahead in terms of economic reform, education, healthcare, skills investment, or because there's a geographic advantages of resources, either water or soil or mining or some other thing, or coastal locations, so on and so forth. So people from the poorer regions, they migrate because what's happening in the process of economic growth world over, the traditional occupations like agriculture and primary occupations, their overall share in the economic cake is declining as a proportion. Actual production may be increasing. Our agriculture production is more than it was earlier, but share of agriculture in totality is much less than it was earlier. At the time of independence, agriculture share was probably 80% in India. Today it is 16-17%. So inevitably what happens as the share increases, certain regions that have gone into the advanced stage of economic progress, they become more prosperous and there's need for workers there. Therefore, from the low-income areas where fewer jobs are there, people migrate to areas where there is a shortage of employees, workers, and jobs are in plenty. You see, you are in Hyderabad city. Including this apartment complex to any part of the city, a large number of migrant workers from Eastern India, Bihar, elsewhere, they're all working here comfortably. In construction industry in Hyderabad, I'm told about 80-85% are migrant workers. If they're not there, construction industry will collapse. I'm sure it's somewhat true with, say, Bengaluru or some other cities. So we must actually encourage migration. Take the United States. It's a fantastic case study. I have some numbers here. In the United States, they also have very strict representational guidelines. They divide the number of congressional districts, our Lok Sabha constituencies, exactly in proportion to the population. What happened in the last 50 years? I've taken 50 years because 50 years ago I started studying American politics. 1972 election I followed very carefully, state-wise. In 1972, California had 43 members of the US Congress. The strength of the US Congress has not changed. Lower House of Congress, House of Representatives, 435 members. Today it's 52, where California attracted more migrants. New York at 39, the second largest state country at that time, electorally and demographically. Today it is 26. It's fallen by 50%, or at least by 1/3 out of 39, it lost 13 electoral seats because of the population relative decline. Illinois state, from 24, it came down to 17. Texas, from 24, went up to 39.
Yeah.
Texas was regarded as large agricultural at the time, relative to the rest of the United States. Now Texas oil and other things became very important industrial center. So it has increased. So migration is the equalizer ultimately. Population changes happen because of natural growth, obviously, births and deaths, but also migration. We are not in 10th century AD when people are stuck to the place of origin, place of birth. People migrate. That's what modernity is about. So I think apart from coming up with a compromise about population versus some kind of a digression in terms of proportionality. We also must encourage migration and give migrants all rights. I am told construction workers in Hyderabad, for instance, when Bihar elections were held a few months ago, lakhs migrated to Bihar. For a month, they did not come back. Construction industry came to a standstill. Why? Because here, they are not yet feeling sufficiently comfortable to enjoy all rights. Voter registration, welfare, housing, and political voice. We must start recognizing wherever you're born in India, if you're living here, working here, you belong to that place. And therefore, you have welfare rights. If you're poor, then your public distribution system, your ration cards, your gas cylinders, your voting rights, and your political voice. Then automatically, a lot of the problem will be resolved. Take Maharashtra. Maharashtra has contained its population very much like the southern states and some other states. Birth rates have come down. And yet, the population of Maharashtra as a proportion of India's population has not come down. Actually, it's gone up a little bit. Why? Migration is much more in Maharashtra. From the beginning, Bombay has always been a beacon of hope and a magnet for workers. Now, even Pune became a significant magnet. So, overall, Maharashtra actually gained in population. Take Delhi city. It gained in population relative to, in proportion to the country. So migration is a leveler. So two things. One is a genuine compromise as India is used to in a federal polity to bring everybody together, somewhere mid-path, and both sides must come halfway. And two, migration and migrants having full rights, including voting rights, instead of you having to go back and vote in some other state. Automatically things will be resolved. So these are all temporary problems. And one good news is, please remember, almost every state in the country is very close to population stabilization level. If a woman during her reproductive life has an average of 2.1 children, that means you are going to have population stable level, not immediately, but after some time. One couple has 2 children, they have in turn 2 children, kind of a thing. But some countries are ahead in the curve, some countries are behind. Kerala and Tamil Nadu, most notable. And therefore, if you strictly allocate seats in proportion to the population, take Kerala. I have the numbers here. These are very simple statistics. Kerala, which has 20 seats, strictly by current estimates of population will get only 14. Tamil Nadu, which is 39, strictly if you go by the population criteria, it gets 27. These are the two significant states whose representation, the numbers will be lost. Other states, much more marginal. Take Andhra Pradesh, it will lose just 4 seats. Significant, but not alarming. Telangana, it will lose 2 seats. Maharashtra, the seat actually gains a seat or 2. But Bihar will gain from 40 now, 10 seats. Uttar Pradesh, 80 now, gains 12 seats. Madhya Pradesh, Rajasthan, etc. will gain 4 or 5 seats or 5, 6 seats. These are the significant changes. Rest of the states, hardly any difference. So I think a few states, both the states that are significantly losing, accept a slightly better formula, but accept population as a principle. The states like UP, Bihar that are gaining, accept a slightly less than your share, accept some kind of a compromise. And then migrants' rights, respect them, make them feel comfortable everywhere in the country, because they are very welcome workers. Without migrants, economy will collapse in areas where there is a shortage of labor. China is already beginning to witness in pockets of China. Many countries are beginning to witness that. South Korea, much of Eastern Europe, and even Western Europe, except the United States, almost all the developed world is witnessing a demographic crisis. So population coming in, provided they have the ability to work and they work hard, provided they have productivity, is actually a tremendous gain to your area. So welcome that. So rethink this idea of nativity. It doesn't matter where you were born, doesn't matter what is your origin. If you're contributing to the society and economy here, you are one of our own. I think that is the ultimate solution.
Right.